Welcome, everybody, to the first Archaeology After Dark of 2021. First things first, I want to thank everybody who has liked, subscribed, and sent me numerous emails about what we do and asking very personal questions in some ways. Yes, I get it. You like the sound of my voice. Please quit telling me that. So my guest for this episode is Michael Krause. Michael, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So tell us about yourself.
Well, for me, archaeology was never really a choice. I kind of grew up in it. My father is an archaeologist, and he brought me out into the field when I was 12 to start doing excavations and pretty much trying to shape me up to actually be something, which I've tried my hardest to undo. But I stuck around the Southeast for a long time. I went to school at Alabama. I did CRM for about 7 years in the Southeast. And now I'm over in Oklahoma trying to get a master's degree and climb up the ladder a little bit.
What are you trying to get a master's in?
Well, at first I was coming here with an idea about how to do digital analysis for ceramics. But I got here and realized that was much more difficult than what I thought it was going to be. And I found my interest really lay more in GIS, using GIS software to look at problems the way we haven't before. We have new information, new data, new ways of looking at things, and it's just an exciting frontier.
So for those of our audience who aren't familiar with GIS or mapping software, how does it work exactly?
It's geographic information systems or software, depending on who you ask. But it pretty much breaks down data into streams of numbers, and then we put those into a visual representation so that you can see patterns, parallels, groupings, just a new way to look at data in a visual way, which for me is really nice because you can tell when you've done a good job because you have a nice clean image or a nice clean map.
So how does that help an archaeologist or a cultural resource manager, as the professional term is, actually do their job?
Well, for cultural resource management, it is of the utmost importance. Our GIS person was the most important person at the last company I was at. That's where the rubber meets the road of the actual data that the field brings in, shovel tests, strat data, artifact information, and it puts it into a geo-referenced template so that you can see where exactly that shovel test with that artifact was found. And you can put details in there like it was found at a depth of blah, blah, blah. There were 2 or 3 strats there. And it's just a really easy way to keep hold of everything and where you can put in a report and tell someone, hey, this is where we found it. This is our recommendation for what to do moving forward. Now, for a more academic perspective, I've come to realize that georeference software can be used to help give cultural resources back. The landscape. There's been a lot of data lost because, the expeditions of the Spanish weren't always that truthful or that accurate. So when they talk about mapping rivers or villages, those aren't good maps. Those aren't actually accurate. So we can take archaeological information that we found, excavations or other data, and place it on a map to make a real, truthful representation of the physical landscape. And we can also attach cultural elements to it as well.
Yeah, I think that's one thing people, when they first start, working out in the field, they don't realize that the land actually shifts over a period of time. Like the way, say, a river is presently, it hasn't always flowed in the same direction and hasn't always been as wide as it is. It hasn't even been in the same place sometimes.
That is so true. Earlier this semester, I was trying to figure out some of the riverways around the Red River, because I always go back to rivers that we, know haven't changed or kind of know. And the Spanish just, their maps make no sense. There's rivers going all sorts of ways, and I have no clue what they're talking about at all.
So the maps you're talking about, are you having to translate them as well as recreate it, or is it in a language you can understand it?
Well, it's really in a what I do right now, or kind of my hobby, is to try to put together new maps from old maps, which is pretty much taking Google Earth and going back to the old transcripts of Spanish maps and trying to line them up, transpose them on top of each other to make it, to geo-reference it and see where they actually are, regardless of what they say or where they say they are.
So you've been doing this, you've been in the field some, you've been in the classroom some. What are some things that have stuck with you through that time?
Well, the first thing that really stuck with me is, for some reason, there's a separation in archaeology, several separations actually, between the lab and the field and professional and academic. There's such a divide there, and I don't know how it got there. Unfortunately, I've probably added to it myself, but there's a separation that there really shouldn't be. We're all working towards the same goal.
Yeah, it's the learning curve in my experience is very steep. Like, you have somebody, you're in the classroom studying archaeology, you have a professor, looking over your shoulder, double checking your work. You get out in the field and someone is yelling at you that it's wrong.
Oh man. Oh yes. And unfortunately, the more education you have, the harder it is to accept kind of things on the fly. It's not how it should be, but it's how it is. We don't always get to look in the places that we really believe there will be a site, even though, academically, we should try to do our best to find sites, to preserve sites. But if it's not under the scope of work for a professional project, there's not a lot you can do. And that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
And, the other thing is when you're studying archaeology academically, you're going somewhere that people have already been. People have dug into it. They know it's there. They know what they're looking for. If you're working on just like a project for somebody, you could just be wandering out in the woods for all you know.
Oh, exactly. One company I worked for, we did some work for a nonprofit, and they just gave us a map, circled a couple places, and said, we want you to survey these places and just make sure that we're not going to hit anything when we dig it up with a backhoe, which, we did everything we could. I don't think anything was found, but nobody had ever done it before.
I mean, nothing ventured, nothing gained. That should be the statement of archaeology.
Ooh, I love that. And I also love the Tyrion quote of, I drink and I know things, but I would amend it to on a very limited scale, a very concise set
So
of knowledge.
Rebecca, I don't know if you saw the episode I did with Rebecca Dutton last time, but she made an interesting point. Somebody asked her what the most interesting thing she'd found as an archaeologist. She said a job.
Oof. I want to say that's sarcasm, but I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I laughed at that for a little bit, and then I was like, oh, God, that's true, isn't it?
I know you laugh and then it hurts a little bit.
Yeah, and then I wanted to cry and drown my sorrows in an adult beverage.
Which that's another thing I've had to talk to people here at school about, is that it's tough to find a job outside of CRM, but CRM is brutal. It'll crush you.
Yeah, she and I talked about the harshness and unforgivingness that is the woods of Alabama.
Oh yeah, I've done some survey out in Oklahoma now. Oof, it's nice. It's flat. There's, things aren't trying to kill you every 2 seconds.
Yes, there are numerous things in the state that try to kill people. You don't even have to be doing anything, and it'll just decide to kill you.
Well, not only that, a lot of work that's done in Alabama is done on people's property. And I don't know if people out there know, but Southerners in the Deep South really don't like people on their property, so they can be just as dangerous as the animals.
Yes, we love our Second Amendment in this state. Not that there's anything wrong with the Second Amendment. Let me be very clear that I'm saying that. But being fast and loose with your firearms while someone is digging a hole around your property is not flattering on your part, I guess.
Well, also, it really doesn't take too much challenge or skill to shoot someone wearing a high-vis vest. So, I mean, there's not even that much achievement behind it.
Yeah, so that's one thing you are asked to do if you're being out in the field is wear a bright yellow or orange vest. You've probably seen people wearing them while they're working on the side of the highway. A lot of the Department of Transportation people wear those. That's something that's usually required in the field. It helps you, stay visible to your team members, and it keeps you from being shot, which is fantastic.
Exactly.
All right, so you've done some field work, in Alabama, but now you're doing some in Oklahoma. What, in your experience, did you find unique about doing CRM work here in the wonderful state of Alabama, as I start to regret saying that now with my statement on the Second Amendment and being shot in the woods?
Well, I mean, besides the people, I love the people. I love my home state. And Alabama is beautiful. And one of the things I do miss is that you walk around the woods and you can kind of tell. It took me a while to really get into my head, but you can really see where people used to occupy the land just by the landscape. A hill, a bluff overlooking the river. You'll come across these beautiful terraced places and realize, oh man, people lived here. And then you'll find evidence and feel really smart. But the landscape, as brutal as it is, I do love my trees. And for some reason, pine straw. I don't know why. I can't explain it.
The scent of a pine tree first thing in the morning when you're getting out in the field, you're still half asleep and you've been jamming to Maroon 5 like we used to. There's just nothing like it.
There really isn't. And that, to me, there are two big things that have kept me in archaeology, and it's the outdoor aspect, the exploring, just being an adventurer, and the other is the people. I love the people you'll find in archaeology. They're all one of a kind. They're special, and I love them.
Oh yeah, I remember we were driving back one day. It was me, you, and Jonah in the truck, and we just randomly started jamming to some Maroon 5 and singing along to that sugar sweet lady.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is not at all what I expected to be doing on this trip.
We are serious professionals
who love our Maroon 5.
Yeah.
So if Maroon 5 can shoot us like a sponsorship or something, that would be great. We'll keep listening to the music if you do that.
Oh man, we'll get Jonah in here and we can make a fool of ourselves all day, every day.
Yeah, you know what? I sent him a message to join us and he hasn't responded. So that's his loss. He can't jam with us to Maroon 5 now.
People.
That boy ain't right. I'm just telling you.
Nope. That boy ain't right.
All right. So back to the topic of archaeology. What are some other things you think people need to know about what we do or how we do it, to help them stay alive while in the field?
Well, to stay alive, water is the most important resource you have. There are times when I kept my hands dirty because, I didn't want to pour water on my hands. I drink that. It's my water.
We recommend gloves also. Gloves are very helpful.
Yes. And also just a good attitude of exploring. I can't tell you how many people I've seen burn out because they think that it's going to be a jaunt through the woods where you're just hiking. But
I'm not going to lie. That is one of the things, I talked about the steep learning curve between academic and professional archaeology. Academic archaeology, you can follow someone else's trail. You've seen their journals. You know where they're going, where the path leads. If someone else is leading you, it gets very difficult very quickly.
Oh, definitely. I've definitely led people in the wrong direction for at least half a mile before.
I think we had that same issue, the first day we were on that solar farm project. We wandered around the woods for probably 2 hours going in the wrong direction because our satellite thingy wouldn't link up with the other thingy.
And yeah, that's part of the attitude. It happens. There's one of the big things about the field is, things go wrong, and being able to adjust on the fly or just have a good attitude about it. Yeah, we wandered around for 2 hours, but we know that landscape now.
Yeah. Like if it wasn't flat when we left, it's flat now.
Oh yeah, and for a little bit, we can say it was pedestrian surveyed, where we walked across it and did a visual inspection.
Yeah. So that's where you can actually just not taking any actual equipment of pedestrian surveys, where you can just walk across the landscape and look at it. You don't actually have to disturb it or anything. You can just look at it.
And that's another thing about archaeology that I love is it's such a wide, there's so many techniques that I don't think people understand. It's not all digging and destruction. There's a little cart that we push around called a magnetometer, which pretty much finds metal or not metal, but looks at different mineral concretions in the ground. And there's ground penetrating radar, which was made famous by Jurassic Park at the very beginning.
Yeah.
We've come a long way since that, but there's so many techniques in archaeology that you can use to uncover information that aren't destructive.
Yeah. So, in your opinion, it's important to maintain the landscape even while you're working on it, right? I mean, that's not just your opinion, that's a professional courtesy we have as archaeologists.
Yes, and more than just as archaeologists, we're supposed to be, I don't want to say stewards of, we're supposed to be stewards of information and guardians of, the landscape that it's in. The best way to keep information in context is to keep it intact inside the landscape, which, that it's pretty important to respect nature enough to not destroy everything, and you probably won't get in trouble as much with landowners as well. So.
Yeah. So that's another thing. We backfill holes. Like, say you do a shovel test. That's why when you finish, you've screened out all the dirt, you've gotten all the good stuff out of it. You throw some dirt back in it so the people following you won't fall in the hole you just dug.
Or, a lot of times in Alabama, there's a lot of cow pastures. People love their horses.
Oh, God.
I don't really care about the people, but those poor horses and cows.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to tell you, working here in Alabama, you realize there's nothing like the smell of manure at 6 o'clock in the morning. It is.
Oddly enough,
it's right.
I've come to kind of miss that. We finally came across the cow field out here in Oklahoma, and I was like, oh man, it smells like the circus. I can do this.
Those aren't cows. They call them buffalo there. They're cows here.
Oh.
We call them cows here. Those are buffalo. They're big and brown and furry.
Well, I just know they're big dogs, so it works out.
That's accurate. Maybe ish.
I'm alive, so.
I mean, yeah. All right. So the point of archaeology, you've been in the field. It's been a long day. You're, just on this side of death. Yeah. The point is you are making it home to your loved ones and you are fine and you can do it all over the next day.
I've had many of those days, and a lot of the times with cultural resource management, you don't even get to go home to your family that day. It's home to a empty hotel room where you lay on the floor and ask yourself those very questions. can I do this? What good came out of it? And
Why do my legs hurt?
why do my arms hurt? Why does my back hurt? What did I do?
Why is my body screaming at me?
And they want me to do it again? Ugh.
And then you thank whoever invented ice that it comes from your freezer.
Oh, yes.
Ice is a wonderful, wonderful thing, people. You have to appreciate it because it saves people.
And it doesn't last for long, so you really have to appreciate it in Alabama.
Yes, the humidity and the temperature in this state, as most of you who live here in Alabama understand what we're talking about. For those of you who live outside the state of Alabama, it gets very hot and humid here most of the year. Like we'll have, soft, pleasant temperatures around 70, 72 degrees. And then later that day, it skyrockets to the triple digits.
It wears on you too. Being out in the field, I did athletics when I was in high school in Alabama. I thought it was gonna prepare me for field work in Alabama. But it's different being out there, 4 to 5 hours than being out there 8 to 10. That humidity just kind of gets you.
And the layers of clothing people suggest you wear do not help that either. If you're out there in January, you have on 4 or 5 layers worth of things, but then, in March, you are comfortable in like 1 or 2.
Yep, and hopefully the weather doesn't change dramatically where you have to shed those 4 layers in the winter.
Oh God, yes. There was a December like 3 years ago, and it was like 80, 70, 80 degrees. I'm like, okay, we just, hang outside for Christmas. So, as an archaeologist or a cultural resource manager, what would you say our ultimate objective would be? Like, as a practice, what could we do for society, I guess?
Well, that's a interesting question.
That's why we're here.
Yes, well, one, yes, that's why we're here. Off the top of my head, I would say for cultural preservation for future peoples, whether indigenous or non-indigenous. But as archaeologists, I would kind of lean towards we should be giving culture back to the peoples who, I don't want to say own it, but it's their culture. We're kind of discovering it, for them and for ourselves, but hopefully we're doing it, for them to return something that we have kind of taken inadvertently. As Americans, this wasn't always our homeland. It wasn't always our cultural heritage to live here as it was other people's. And so when construction projects come around where they're destroying that heritage that was there before we were in order to advance our lifestyles, I think it's important for us to remember that we owe them something for that progress, for that we're modifying the land, but we're not modifying the culture. We need to give that back, or at least give them the option of having it back instead of just destroying it outright.
Absolutely. And that's another thing, that differences between doing it academically and doing it professionally. For academic sake, you're just doing it to learn, to understand more. When you're doing it professionally, you're, restoring something that somebody has left behind. You're giving it back to them.
You're protecting it. You're making sure that no further harm comes to it. Unfortunately, harm is going to come to it, but we want to limit or mitigate as much harm as we can.
Yeah. So what else, archaeology?
Well, archaeology.
Yeah.
It's such a wide field, and I've enjoyed so much actually coming back to school because it is a stark difference when you feel like your back's against the wall out out in the field, you're trying as hard as you can to save everything you can. You're trying to get all the lithics, all, anything of value, and you feel like it's a losing battle constantly because you're doing one project, you're doing the best you can, and then it's on to the next one. And in the back of your mind that as soon as you leave that project, you're giving that land its last rites, and it will be destroyed. And you have to be secure with the knowledge you've done everything, by your conscience and by professionalism to make it right.
Which is why, as archaeologists, picking up something, insignificant off the ground, something as small as a rock actually could change the entire landscape of the project you're working on, which is why it is important that we document, write down, and study every teeny tiny little thing.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why, as unfortunate as it is, that there is this separation between the lab and the field. We need knowledge that is in the lab. We need to be able to apply it to the field and vice versa in order to get the full picture. We're only getting puzzle pieces out in the field. We don't know where they fit into the larger picture without that context provided by the lab. And the lab doesn't have the puzzle pieces without the field. So it's something that we really need to work on our cohesion, because it is important to document.
Yeah. So to wrap things up, say somebody wants to get started as an archaeologist, they're maybe an undergraduate student, or they're just somebody who has like a passing interest in archaeology. How would you recommend they get started, or what would you recommend they do or look at?
Well, if you're already at a university, I would say that you should talk to an archaeology professor, and they will have specific volunteer programs, or they will know of something to put you on the right track. But if you're an amateur or a volunteer that would like to get into it, I would say the state parks, the archaeological state parks. I know a really good one down in Moulton, Alabama, or up in Moulton, Alabama, called Oakville Indian Mounds.
Yeah.
A great place. It's got a museum. They're always looking for volunteers. Just, it's a way to get your foot in the door where you can learn while also getting to know people, because unfortunately, archaeology is, to an extent, who can vouch for you.
Yeah, that's another thing I'm trying to do with this program is I realize that, especially with COVID, we are scattered as a community, and I'm trying to, bring us back together when we can actually get back to work and be with each other in person in the field, actually doing the work.
Well, not only that, but I found that some of my most productive conversations with people have been at the bar, or at an empty hotel room where we're all drinking and just feel comfortable enough to actually discuss things that aren't always discussed.
Yes, that is one more thing that we as archaeologists recommend, and that is alcoholic beverages. They will be one of your best friends and simultaneously one of your worst enemies if you have to be up and in the field at 6 o'clock in the morning.
I've managed to figure out how to walk that razor's edge, but it is something that all archaeologists will come to know eventually.
Yeah, it's not a thrilling feeling when you have to be, hungover, going in the truck to a site with somebody and their freshest person in the morning personality.
All those morning people just
like, yes, I know you're pleasant and chipper, and just shut up, please.
You're a good person. I'm not. I get it.
Yes, I get it. You're charming and outgoing and everything, and I'm hungover. So please, let's just be who we are for the moment.
Well, it also helps you advance, because you don't want to be hungover, so you learn how to do moderation, and you learn your limits. And then there are times you just stop doing those.
I don't understand. What are you trying to teach us with moderation? Moderation is good, bad?
Some would call them A, some would call them B.
Well, I think that's going to wrap up the episode. Michael, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm
Absolutely.